We're back. I am running on maybe 6 hours of sleep, and I was at the ProBox TV show last night. We're probably going to start there. I am with Dakota. Let's get into it.
Let's get into it, bro. It was interesting. I had texted you at one point to see whether you were there, and then I just saw you in the crowd at one point. It was the only time that I saw you, but it was blaringly obvious that it was you.
And then I got moved to ringside. So then it's like, ironically, when I was just like entering the arena and randomly somewhere, like figuring out where to be, you saw me. And then when I was like basically on the ring apron, like you're like, yeah, don't recognize. I think it's because I did a backwards hat move. Kind of makes me fit right in.
I didn't see you ringside. I saw you in the crowd.
That's it. That actually makes me feel better. That like me being lost in the arena, just sitting down for a second, is where I got ID'd. Say Susam, saludos. So what stood out to you on the ProBox card is from the outside? Because I didn't hear any of the broadcast. I just was there. I saw every single fight. What were your thoughts?
Well, it was a great card. I mean, obviously, you know, having had him on Slip and Weave this year and haven't been able to talk to him, like, I do think that Justin Pauldo is serious shit. Like, I think he is serious business, especially at lightweight. You know, to see him stay composed after getting buzzed in the second round, take over the fight and make a guy quit in the corner. You know, I do think that he's a problem at lightweight for anybody because he has that composure. He's got the skill set. He stays within himself. And I thought he was great. You know, listen.
Let's stay right there because I got insight. So I saw the shot he got hit with. I believe the fighter he's fighting was
right. It was a little left hook.
Was it? To me, it looked like a right hand, but it could have been a left hook. It was.
I thought I saw him throw it. I think he threw an uppercut, and then there was a little left hook that landed, but it was subtle.
Sometimes when you're ringside, you have the worst view. And for me, it felt like the shot that I saw was a right hand that went through the guard, and there could have been a bang bang. And then his legs went wobbly. And a lot of people, I feel like, thought it could have been trouble. But I felt as though, so for me, Pauldo is an interesting character because I've talked with him. I have deep respect for him, love his management.
Taking tough competition consistently.
Taking tough competition. So, of course, people are going to be more critical, right? Because when you actually fight, you know, credible guys or tough guys, things can happen. Yeah, I mean, to me, I think that he's a 140 pounder. I'm not sure I absolutely love him at 35. He's one of the only fighters where I look at and I wonder, is he losing a little bit of himself at this weight class? Because I feel like part of the getting caught was he did look a little dry to me when he got in the ring.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Did they talk about that on the broadcast?
No, but I noticed it immediately because that's something, you know, the more these guys cut weight, I feel like that's a telltale sign of either you're dehydrated or you didn't warm up proper. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, it looked like he would, I think he could benefit from being at 40. I don't know. To me, it was impressive the fact that he righted the ship after basically getting wobbled pretty, like an exaggerated wobble.
Yeah, bro, he was hurt.
And that he targeted the body and broke him down. I think that there's two ways it goes. You have a real guy who's going to be a top contender, or you have a guy that gets to a certain level and the guys are going to punch just a little bit harder and that's going to be his ceiling. I think there's two ways to look at it. But I also thought that Ronnie Shields is like one of these coaches that people just don't give enough credit to. And the way that like an OG coach like Ronnie Shields doesn't panic, just kind of goes about it, says what he was, and then got him pressing the action, going to the body, and then changed the fight. I thought it was a pretty impressive performance. I also thought that Theran basically fought a 4-round fight. And a little of that was Pauldo, but it looked like he was trying to land something really consequential early and that he was not saving himself for the second half of the fight.
I think there was some truth to that. And I also just think the body work generally took the motivation out of him. And you could see Justin really start to do that in the 4th, 5th rounds once he had fully gotten his legs back under him and he took over, you know, the remainder of the fight from there.
Couple of comments in the chat. Jesus M says, what's next for Pauldo? And also, Jesus M with a very strong opinion. Pauldo needs to step his competition up. So what do you think, Dakota, in those two statements, and what would you like to see as in the next step?
I don't know. I feel like this was a credible opponent. Shavkat Rakhimov was for sure a contender going into their fight, and he completely dominated Rakhimov in a way that we haven't seen happen. And he's fought at the very, top of the division. I mean, he's number 11 on BoxRec right now at lightweight. I agree with you, Lukie, that he should move up in weight, but if he's going to stay at this weight, like, I think that he's if Floyd Schofield's looking for an interesting opponent, it kind of feels like Justin Pauldo would be a good candidate for that. Another young guy in their prime who has some momentum behind them. Lucas Body, Albert Bell, any one of those fights, I think would be, very interesting to see Justin in. And I think that he'd have a chance in any of them.
So I think Body and Floyd Schofield might end up kind of pursuing title fights. They might be at that stage where like waiting around for what Tank's doing. Albert Bell was a name that I saw that I liked a matchup with. What was the other one? Where's my
Maybe Joe Cordano, right?
No, Joshua Pagan is the other one that I really like. I think that's a good, because Pagan's taken some hard fights. Pauldo is capable. I think that's kind of like
Noakes, right? Maybe Sam Noakes.
Yeah, I mean, like that tier of opponent, right? He's proven it. For me, it was kind of jarring to see a fight be that dramatic and then him not just right the ship, but make it very monotonous and boring. Like the drama was sucked out of that fight in 2 rounds after being clipped. And that doesn't typically happen. And he did it in such a manner where I didn't feel as though there was ever going to be a change. Like he just kind of,
it was systematic, but it was quick.
Yeah. Do you get what I'm saying? Like normally when a guy gets clipped, there's drama of will he get clipped again? This just didn't feel like that.
He also did a great job of kind of blunting the follow-up. He was very difficult to hit in the 30 seconds or so after that. And I think it allowed him to get just enough of his legs underneath him that he was able to get away, then actually recovered in between rounds. And I think that, it shows the power of recovery. It also shows his tenacity. I thought the whole thing was impressive, honestly.
Hatback segment. They said Karlos Balderas lost. Still the basic looking for one punch. Waits too much. What are your thoughts on Balderas' fight?
I didn't think he lost. I thought he probably won a close fight or it was a draw. I don't remember if the scorecards were any good or not. Oh no, it was a split decision. I thought it was, fair enough. Like, I don't really know what to make of him, Lukie, because you can see the ability when he lets his hands go. There's flashes of it in literally every round, but there's just nothing sustained. At times it feels like maybe he's just a good fighter that can get outworked, a la Jojo Diaz.
I want to throw some my observation. I think he has to commit himself to the sport a bit more. To me, looking outside and someone that knows Karlos, someone that likes Karlos, and someone that if he looked at this, like I mean this from a place of I want the best for him.
Yeah.
I think he has to push as hard as he can for the next 2 to 3 years in the gym and have no time away from the gym because the talent's there. But to me, I see a talented fighter that just doesn't trust his conditioning.
It's like Andy, right? It's like Andy Ruiz, where you can see it when he lets his hands go, but there's just never enough of it. And this guy who is a good fighter, but just pure talent-wise, not on his level, and to just watch a guy that good kind of sit in the pocket in the high guard and just wait, it's again, it's kind of like JoJo. I'm just not quite sure, but I don't even know. He's not even going to get to the level that JoJo got to.
I think he'll get to the JoJo level because Karlos is very talented.
He'll have like a Tevin Farmer type win.
Yeah, I think he could. I think it's just different.
JoJo had some big wins. That's what I'm saying. You know what I mean?
JoJo just had more momentum going before his career kind of went the wrong way. Karlos has had a brutal knockout loss, and then he kind of had like a win that's not, or a loss that's not aging too bad, where Nahir Albright kind of won a snoozer against him. I mean, I think the older he gets, the more serious he gets, the more dangerous he is. because I think people forget how good he was as an amateur and how they kind of underrate him. And if he locks in, he's a very dangerous guy, I think, because I think people don't realize how good, how good he could be. I also think this is one of those things where I believe it was a last minute replacement. And this is someone that he's sparred before. He's from Santa Maria. The guy's from Oxnard. I know people never want to hear this, but guys that have sparred each other, like we saw with David Stevens, Darius Fulgrim, they just know each other. And it's hard to really look good against guys that kind of know what you do. Even though sparring and fighting are different, when they know the look, it's kind of different.
100%. I think it was just the intensity level that was lacking for a lot of the fight.
Mankey Crazy said there were a lot of people who saw Balderas was a minus 12,000 favorite, which Dakota loves. He's a big betting guy. He'll break that down in the chat. And they confused Quiros for Balderas. So basically, they're saying Balderas came in as a big favorite, and people.
And Quiros was tough. He had some game in him, and he was willing and able to stay busy in moments where Balderas was kind of cool with just looking.
Thoughts on Charlie?
I'm curious to know what you think, bro, because I thought it was a great performance. But again, kind of like Justin, I just see a guy that takes a piece of himself away, getting down to that weight. I can just kind of see it in his body, and even in some of his reaction time, you see just how talented and how much ability he has. But I wonder if, maybe the wow factor gets taken away from that weight.
Yeah, I mean, for him, it's like I just maybe that's something. He just doesn't fight enough currently. He's not active enough. I believe he'll finish 2025 with 2 fights.
It was a great performance, though, by the way. I just want to clarify.
It's a great performance, but it's hard to assess what his weight cut is, where he's at when he's coming off a long layoff. And you're really looking to see can he get the rust off? He fought D'Angelo Keys, who was there to be a spoiler and be a tough guy, And I thought he did good. He got the knockdown. I think he wanted to finish it a little earlier, went back to being composed, gets the stoppage. It's good. I think the big thing for him is I think that this speaks to a different thing in boxing. It's not just a Charlie thing. It's like when guys get to an 8-round fight, there's a lot of training that goes into the sport. And you got to stay motivated either with fights or the pay or something. There needs to be some motivation. Otherwise, you're basically doing these really long camps that are longer than amateur fights. And you're not really seeing much changing. And as time will come, patience is a virtue. But I think that the activity hopefully can he can be more active this year, because I think that he really needs it. He's getting to a point where he needs a year with maybe 3 or 4 fights, consistently fighting. And then that could vault him into fighting a Pauldo. Maybe that's the fight, is Charlie versus Pauldo in next summer,
I also think that there's some steps, that Charlie would have to take between Keys and Justin. That's a big step up. And I think that just seeing, and honestly, I'd like to see them fight at 140 if that's possible. You know what I mean?
I just think that when guys have an Olympic level pedigree, Olympic alternate, even if the opponents haven't been the same level, those guys get moved a little quicker. So if he gets to a 10-round fight, he'll take 10-round main event level opponents.
Sure.
And it just, so yeah. Mankey Crazy, Karlos Balderas is in danger of becoming Joseph Adorno than Jojo Diaz. Karlos is 30 years old with a stagnant career. Did 360 promotions drop Karlos Balderas? I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to that. How was the attendance? Attendance was good, man. It was cracking out there. I really enjoyed it. Did you have any thoughts on Erik Badillo's fight?
Man, that was a fun one, Lukie. That was a fun one right there. I thought Elwin Soto, I remember maybe even around the same time that Bam was coming up, I remember seeing Soto before we had context on the opponents and thinking you know what? Bam and Soto down the line can be kind of fun. And it didn't pan out for Soto the same way. He's not the same level of talent, but he's really fucking good. And he's fought at a high level now for, a decent number of years. And I thought that Badillo, especially in the second half, was able to separate against a really good fighter just by using angles and good footwork. And Soto was there and he was game the whole time, but to see Badillo kind of break him in that last 3 rounds, it was a really impressive performance, I would say.
Few things. That was a pretty close fight. I'm not sure how you saw it. I thought it was a pretty close fight.
It was close.
I thought Badillo really separated in the second half. I thought that the level of output was a concern for me early on with Erik Badillo. He's got to, if he's going to go to a championship fight, he's got to throw more punches.
And Soto is good at closing range for a short guy. He knows how to kind of throw while he's moving. He does that better beef thing where he kind of walk throws, and so he knows how to close range really well. I think it was around like the 7th, 8th round where it felt like Badillo really mastered it.
Yeah, so I mean that's something to monitor moving forward, is just how he handles that stuff, because that I didn't love that. Badillo's mean. When he fights mean, he does really well. Like when he lets his combination, to me, it was just Soto. Maybe Soto's a hard hitter. Had him a little hesitant at times. But I think this was a good, I don't want to say lateral step, but it's a good step to prepare Badillo for a potential title fight next year,
Definitely.
And I worry about in a title fight, he's got to throw more punches.
Yeah, and I think it's, there was even times where it's like you can be as slippery as you want, but if one guy throws 12 punches and lands 1 and you don't throw any, as good as that can look over the course of a whole round, if every round is looking like that, it's like you're going to lose the round just on not being as busy.
Then we'll touch on the last 2 fights. Cobra Ruiz and defeats Kubicki to win a title. And what's the other fight I'm blanking on?
Muhammad Yaqubov
versus Cristian Cruz. What were your thoughts on these 2?
Man, Yaqubov and Cruz, that was a fun fight. I actually scored at a draw while it was happening, and I felt like Yaqubov won the last 3 rounds clean, but I think I had it 5 rounds to 2 through 7 for Cruz Chacon, and he was very, very interesting style, the way he would pop in and out of the pocket. He always closed the rounds really strong, and he threw kind of weird combinations that a more standard Yaqubov seemed a little bothered by. And I think at times you would see Cruz Chacon start to throw a combination, and Yaqubov would make a miss, but he would pull all the way out of range. And so, especially for the shorter guy, there was no way for him to answer. And I felt like it kind of took him a little bit to find his jab and figure out that part of the range, which brought the fight, at least down the stretch, he dominated that part of the fight, and for me, made it a draw. So, listen, I love a story where a guy, like Johnny Gonzalez or whoever, guys that lose a couple fights early and become something. And I think that that Cristian Cruz is one of those guys. And I also think that Yaqubov's a hell of a fighter, man.
I think Cristian Cruz, to me, reminds me of Venado Lopez, and he has Venado Lopez's team in his corner. Win over Jeremy Hill, now a draw with Yaqubov.
Tough when you got 7 losses, though. When you have 2 or 3, it's like a different. You can kind of go on a winning streak, and people can look past it. But when you're a 7-loss guy, it's easy to rob that guy, and so it's impressive when a guy's able to keep winning through.
Yeah, there's something about him that's really interesting when a guy doesn't lose that inner self-belief with that many losses, because typically guys start to question, am I really this good, when they've lost that many fights? Sure. So that's one thing. Then Cobra Ruiz beating Kubicki, pretty fun back and forth fight.
Yeah, that was a fun little slugger. Ruiz is clearly like a big puncher for that weight and for women's boxing, and because she's able to change the tone of fights with her power, there's certain defensive things she doesn't have to work on. So the early success that Kubicki had in the first 4 or 5 rounds completely goes away when she gets hurt and dropped in the back half of the fight, and that's impressive, but you can only last but so long with that style.
was pretty impressed with Kubicki too. I thought she just, there's a durability thing, and it could be linked to age. She's 22 years old. A part of me just wonders.
She's only 22.
She's only 22.
See, that is impressive. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so she's 22, and it feels like a lot of these early losses are experience things.
Well, she's getting the experience now. And, you know, I think Paulie made some great points about the feinting, like it was a feint-free zone for her. And I think if she could just make herself a little bit less predictable coming in, that she could continue to get better and be a contender or a champion herself at some point.
Did Juarez win? I'm not sure. Do you know the Juarez that they're talking about?
I don't.
Okay, so let me know which Juarez. Iron Lady is a horrible boxing nickname. Well, tell us how you really feel. Let's go to Ben Whittaker. What are your thoughts on Ben Whittaker?
I have very limited exposure to Ben Whittaker, and after seeing that fight, I still have very limited exposure to Ben Whittaker because it was about 1.5 minutes long. But I mean, an interesting, explosive, fast, twitchy, light heavyweight with amateur pedigree, I think is an awesome thing to just throw into the mix. He's clearly getting moved relatively quickly, right? Already a main event fighter fighting decent opposition. And, you know, I would love to see him in the mix. I think that, you know, what I'm trying to figure out with him is am I watching what I was watching early in Josh Kelly's career? Am I watching a guy that the sum of the parts is not as great? You know what I mean? Like, I could see that there's great elements, but does it all come together for something serious? That's still up in the air for me, you know, but I think regardless, he could be a Josh Kelly type. And even in Kelly's shortcomings, he's still been a fighter of substance and finds himself now in the biggest fight of his career after all the up and down. So that's a whole lot of me saying I was impressed, still trying to figure out what I'm making of him.
So for me, Whittaker is two things. Like, obviously, he was 2020 Olympic silver medalist at light heavyweight. He's a really tall fighter. He's got this pedigree, but for me, it's hard to separate. He has this over-the-top personality, and the personality is always going to go with the performances. And when he has like a knockout like this, it's going to build him up. And it's like, this is the next savior. And when he has his hard fights, people are going to question, is he good? And for me, the thing with Whittaker is it's very much based around his personality. Because British boxers, as we've talked about,
personality.
He's, I don't know, he's more outgoing. He's more of like, you see him show up and he's wearing like designer outfits. And he's not like showing up like Derek Chisora in like, you know, some Dickies and a Carhartt and saying, I just want to fight. I want to fight so bad.
He's not blue collar. He's not blue collar.
He's not blue collar. And I think one thing that our fan base has taught us, our listenership, is British boxing fans love blue collar fighters. Yep. And he's more of a modern influencer fighter.
But is it like Devin, like we were talking about last week, where it's like there's not a whole lot of personality there and people just kind of look at him and get like a weird attitude? So or is
he actually gives quotes and says things. So I think this week, like, he said something to the effect that he doesn't think he's that far away from fighting Benavidez. And he says things sensationally to move the needle. And it's like he's going to generate reactions from people. And it's like, I think there's been this was his first fight with Matchroom. He was with Boxer before. And I think there's a lot of people that are looking at how are the British fight fans going to take to him? And is this the next form of British fighters? Or is this just a unique fighter in British boxing history? Because even Anthony Joshua, who's, I'd say, the first British boxer who didn't really have a connection to the media per se, he still upheld some of like the, you know, I'm just here to fight. You know, there's a little bit of that everyman's that resonates with British fight fans. I don't see a lot of that with Whittaker. You know, this is someone that I think likes being flashy. He doesn't want to resonate per se with the young people. He does like the rapper poses when you see and it sounds silly, but it's like, that's kind of part of the intrigue for me is, as Whittaker performs, how is he judged by the British public based on the performances?
How do you think he does with like Anthony Yard?
I don't know. Because I think Yard is on the way down, so I think it's a closer fight. But I think
Or
that
even just
Micah,
like Boazzi or somebody else that's kind of at the top of the British light heavyweight.
I mean, I think he can hang with some of the guys. I just think that after seeing him fight Liam Cameron, there's questions around how uncomfortable physical fights go, because traditionally people that talk a lot don't tend to like physical, grueling fights. That's been a thing, is that you put a lot of pressure on yourself, and then when the fight is very intense and you have to back up your words, you have a big check that you have to write. And I think that that's the type of style. So maybe Yard is able to do that, but I think he's a little old. I just think guys like Benavidez, David Morrell, physical fighters, are going to be pretty hard. Iman Kitov, who he beat in the Olympics, I thought Kitov beat him. I think that's a hard fight. I think he's just going to have trouble with physical guys that aren't going to respect his distance, his athleticism. Who would you match Whittaker with next? Are we talking about like a great fight for the chat, or are we talking about just like
What about Khalil? That'd be a good fight.
I mean, it would be a good fight. Like, let's see. So I'll give you 2 bouts that I'd make. Not that anyone's like, man, I'm so thrilled to. And of course, I have to do
Maybe
this.
Jesse
again.
Hart. I think Jesse Hart would be a good fight for him.
Let's see. Pulling up my ratings. Okay, so I would go, if possible. I don't think this fight makes sense with the promoters, but Ben Whittaker versus Zach Parker, or Ben Whittaker versus Willie Hutchinson, I think would be a good fight. And then
I think I'd rather see the Hutchinson fight.
And then if we're going world level, I think Albert Ramirez.
I think Hutchinson is world level, is he not? I mean, he's like a top 15.
He is, but like I think he's fringe. Like he's at the back end. I think Albert Ramirez is like the highest level fight that you could make, but that's going to show you what you got. And I think that part of, to me, what Ben Whittaker is there's a big personality that follows the skill sets and the accomplishments. And how does the personality match the accomplishments? Because I think for most people, if the personality is bigger than the accomplishments, you start to look like a goofy person, no matter what you've done in the past. And I think that it's going to be interesting to see his development, because
listen, guys do it in the States all the time, though.
But I think that it's a unique situation, because how many British boxers have kind of come out the gate like Whittaker? And maybe I'm wrong in saying this, but this is just how I perceive it.
I mean, I guess I don't really know enough about him, but like, there's been brash or confrontational British fighters through the years. David Hay is kind of the first one that comes to mind. Maybe Tony Bellew. And maybe they weren't as flashy, but then you have the Nepo babies with Ben and Eubank. I think that there are guys that have kind of brought some of that forward,
I think that with Whittaker, you're looking at someone who's got fast twitch, who sees himself like a Roy Jones Jr. type figure, who's going to be very confident, and he's not going to be super humble leading up to fights. And I think that kind of soured people, the Liam Cameron fight, to be honest with you. It was like 2 fights. They didn't really have resolution. Now he's back. And I'm just curious, because I feel like there's a level of indifference around him.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was a great Matchroom debut. I mean, do my opinions seem off base or bad?
No, not at all. I think, I think the way I look at him is I'm keeping my eye on him.
Well, I think that like the way I'm looking at it is there's obviously a skill set, but it's personality first. And then how does the personality match the skill set? Because this fight to me, it's fine, but it was a debut. Like this was he had a great debut. Let's see how he moves along. Najee Lopez versus Ben Whittaker. I mean, that's a fight. That's a good fight. Bertha Gomez, we're going to get to the upcoming fight. We're going to do those breakdowns pretty shortly. I just want to talk about Aaron Bowen lost on this undercard. That was pretty shocking. I know you're a big Aaron Bowen fan, so I wanted to bring that up for you. He he lost to Tommy Cowling. I know you'd been covering the middleweight Tommy Cowling for a while, but Bowman is a prospect signed to Matchroom Boxing. That's always something notable. And one other thing I wanted to bring up is Frazer Clarke lost to Jamie TKV. And I have to wonder, is this just the end of Frazer Clarke? Like, is Frazer Clarke no longer going to be a top guy, like after the Fably Wardley fights?
I mean, that was a brutal knockout, bro. It's tough to know, especially at heavyweight, you know, how guys come back from not just that knockout, but taking as many clean shots as he did in their first fight.
And this one, if you go and watch it, which I feel like a lot of people will not go and see this one, but now you look at his fights, he got stopped in one round by Fabio Wardley in October 2024. 13 months later, he loses a split decision to Jamie TKV, who's 8-2, a fine enough fighter, but in all sincerity, probably shouldn't be viewed as a similar level to an Olympic level fighter as Frazer Clarke. The fight probably could have been stopped late. Clarke was really hurt in this fight, and I feel like this was the type of fight where he took damage that's going to shorten his career. And it's a strange one because I don't really know how much farther Jamie TKV can go. Like, it's just one of these weird upsets where congratulations to Jamie TKV, sneaks in here, gets a really, really big win. I think possibly like the biggest upset of the month in many ways. And I guess the sad part is what's the roadmap for either? Like, there's not really a roadmap, and that kind of kills enthusiasm when talking about things. But it's a really big win for a blue collar British fighter, you know, a UK based European level fighter. I thought that was a big win. So I wanted to bring that up because that's probably not going to be talked about a lot.
Yeah, I mean, if there is any model, maybe it's like, you know, the David Price model, where it's like even after all those losses, he was always down to take the tough guy and then beats Dave Allen and has kind of his signature moment, and then he gives Povetkin some trouble. So maybe he can be at least resilient.
Guess the thing is, it's like you don't usually think of an Olympian in that way.
Sure.
You know, it's like he's like an Olympian, dare I say, gatekeeper. Lamont Roach.
Audley Harrison.
That's true. Lamont Roach Jr. versus Isaac Pitbull Cruz. What are your thoughts, Dakota?
You know, my instinct tells me that Lamont's going to have too many tools for this fight. I feel like we saw it against Rayo, where there's a certain style that he's just not going to know how to deal with. It's a different intentionality of fighting. If somebody takes a remotely defense first approach and doesn't let him set his feet, I think it's going to be very hard. And on top of that, I feel like even in the pocket that Lamont has enough punching power to, at a minimum, get Cruz's respect and slow him down. So I think this is going to be a maybe even the signature win of Lamont's career so far. The only thing that could be a challenge is the weight. You know, I do wonder how it's going to be now moving up another weight class to fight a very physical, strong guy. So that is, there is a world, I think, where Pitbull is just a little bit too strong and a little bit too physical. And but I think it's going to be, I personally think Lamont's going to win.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like the thing with Pitbull is we go back to July 2023, split decision, Giovanni Cabrera, that could have gone either way. That was a very close fight. Knocks out Rolly Romero, one of his better wins of recent. Loses to Jose Valenzuela. Angel Fierro fight was just like a back and forth barn burner. And Omar Salcido, that was a fight where it was short notice because Fierro had a weight issue. That's his recent resume. So if you notice, like, Cruz is having a lot of competitive fights. Like the Rolly fight wasn't competitive, but there's a lot of competitive fights. Two ways this fight goes. Cruz is just too physically strong and big, and the fight, Roach isn't able to compete because there's a size difference. I tend to believe Roach is probably going to win this one, or at the very least, this is going to be a very close fight. I think they're strategically moving up in weight because Cruz is, what is he, 5'4"?
Yeah, maybe he might be like 5'3" even. He might be a Nick Ball type.
So he's like 5'4" at 140. So you're really fighting closer to a 130 and 135 pounder. So it's a strategic move up to junior welterweight to see how the division is for a big fight, pay-per-view headliner. So I think it's partially a strategic opponent to move up, get comfortable. I think the bigger question is, what does Lamont do with the 130-pound title? Because he's had that belt and he hasn't made a defense of it this year. I think his last defense was when I was in Italy, of all things, which was in June of 2024. So I'm very curious to see what happens.
I don't know how he hasn't been stripped.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to see what happens with that title, because I guess what's interesting for this fight is it feels like Lamont probably is going to win this fight, but we don't know what weight class Lamont would continue at, because Cruz to me feels like a guy who could fight at 30 or 35 fighting at 40. So in a world, he could possibly even go back down to 30 if there's a compelling fight. He could go to 35 or he could stay at 40. So I'm just kind of curious to see what happens after this fight. I have no clue what this fight looks like.
I think it's going to be good, though. Like, it's a hell of a card, and I think that it's going to be a good action fight. And I think that Cruz is going to make it interesting, but I think at some point Lamont's going to find his legs and will just have the ability to do certain things that Cruz just can't do.
Any hangover from a big fight for Roach? Sometimes guys have the best performance of their career and have a hangover.
It's
that
possible,
is something to
bro.
talk about.
There's a lot of fucking letdown for him, since that fight. On top of not getting the decision that it seems pretty obvious he deserved, then the fight is going to happen, and then it's not happening, and then it's because he's going to fight Tank's going to fight Jake Paul, and then that fight's not even happening. So it just, unfortunately, in all of that, the one that got kind of screwed the most was Lamont. And I think letdowns like that can impact certain fighters. There's no doubt about it.
Devil's advocate. Is Cruz starting to go downhill and we're just not looking at it the right way? Like he's moving up in weight where he might be at a big deficit, and he's really had competitive fights in 2 out of his last 3 fights, and the only fight that wasn't competitive was a short notice opponent. Like, are we not maybe looking at him the right way?
I don't know, man. I think he's kind of just is what he's always been, and he fights really tough competition like every fight out. There isn't really a fight off for Cruz.
Hey, Susam, Dakota, are you a boxing trainer?
I have been. I'm not currently actively, but I have trained guys before for sure.
Pay-per-view buy guesses is what Jesus Sam wants to know for this.
That one's for you, Lukie.
I'm gonna hit with I don't care. I know probably 2 people that will buy this one, and it's me and Dakota. So I can give you the guess that at least 2 people will buy it. Co-feature. Let's get to the man. Everyone's throwing out the fights that I want to kind of save for the last, but I want to talk about Erislandy Lara versus Janibek. It's a good one, bro. What do you think of this fight?
Most exciting middleweight fight in years. I can't think of one that I've been in. Honestly, I think Mosley and Ramos is another very exciting middleweight fight. I'd love to see the winner of those 2 fights fight each other. But, just to see Lara at 42 years old, to me, like he's kind of everything I love about boxing in a lot of ways. And I know, maybe he stunk out a fight you watched 15 years ago. But I think he is special. He's one of the most unappreciated, underappreciated guys in my era of boxing for sure. Easily a Hall of Famer, arguably undefeated. And, we haven't seen him in with like a big test at middleweight. He's been a dominant champion, an inactive champion, taking on a guy closer to his prime, maybe than Lara is in Janibek. I love the fight, bro, and I got to be honest, it's tough to pick against Lara. It is tough to pick against him, and he just has this wealth of experience. We've yet to see that moment where it looks like, okay, this is an old guy. And Janibek's really good, but I do think that Lara if he's still again, there's always that caveat of did he get old overnight? Did he get old, since the Danny Garcia fight? And that is possible, but barring that, I just think he's too dynamic.
Yeah, it's hard to bet against Lara. And I know it's crazy to say arguably a pound for pound fighter against a 42-year-old man, but it just feels to me like
I got him in my top 15, bro. I felt like he never lost his, no one ever took that spot from him.
Well, it kind of speaks to his greatness that Janibek seems like he's having hard fights, trouble getting fights, and then Lara just takes the fight. I really think Lara, if he wins this, has a chance to be like a 50-year-old champion. Because I think he could fight once a year and just fight guys. And if he, this is probably going to be the toughest fight of his, if he keeps going for some time. And, that Denzel Bentley fight to me really was cautionary, really was concerning for me. I didn't love that fight. And it's hard to unsee because Bentley's had fights where he struggled after. And maybe Janibek had injuries in that camp or something or another. But it's hard to unsee certain fights. You know what I mean? And it's like Lara does what Bentley does, even as an old fighter, better.
And Janibek is not a Jarrett Hurd. He's not an Alfredo Angulo. He's not that kind of relentless volume guy. He's a little bit more of a thinking man's fighter than that. And I think that only plays into Lara's advantage. You have to be kind of reckless to even have a chance, it seems like.
Yeah. I mean, you have to
anytime he's in with another guy that was a little more arm's length or a little bit more of a thinker, if it was Austin Trout, whoever it was, Danny Garcia, like those are the guys he smokes.
Yeah, to me, it just seems stylistically, this is the type of fight that he loves. And the only way Janibek wins is if his legs are just so much faster than Lara, where Lara physically can't compete. Because I just don't see Janibek as someone that's going to press. Like, I don't see him, like you said, it's the physical fighters who've just eaten his shots and come forward and just been like fight on the inside, which I think that's the deficit for some Cuban fighters is they don't practice fighting on the inside. They're great distance fighters, but they don't have the inside game as well. And, it's hard for me to go against Lara.
Yeah. A true legend of our time.
Is Janibek a top 10 guy if he beats Lara?
Like a top 10 pound for pound?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, depending on how he does it, right? Like that's a pretty, I know middleweight's so dead, but that is a pretty significant like passing of the torch kind of moment, it would seem like. And, Lara being, I think, the Hall of Famer, maybe the greatest Cuban pro of all time, I think it's very possible.
Let's go to who do you have for Mosley Jr. versus Jesus Ramos? We got 2 comments about that from Bertha Gomez.
I love that fight, man. We've been waiting for Shane to get this big fight for so long. And, deservedly so after beating Rosado, after beating Danny Jacobs. Like he's just kept winning and not really gotten the big opportunity. And now here it is. But I personally think that Jesus is a generational talent. I think he's a Bam Rodriguez type potentially. And just hasn't had the fights that Bam has had to prove it in the same way. And I think Shane is, that quality of guy that will help to show you just how good Jesus is.
Yeah, I think this is a real fight. I think, the hard thing for both guys, they don't have much momentum coming in. I don't think either have been all that active. It's just when 2 guys are inactive, it's hard to pick against the younger fighter because you feel like the younger fighter can kind of pick up on the activity. I do think that people really write Shane Mosley Jr. off as like not a very credible or good fighter. And he's probably he's probably improved more than, say, he's probably one of the 5 fighters who've improved the most over the last 10 years. Like he's at the highest level of growth of any fighter. And I mean, it speaks to what I think, that I don't think a lot of people watch boxing. I think they talk boxing. So they form opinions, they form ways to conversate, but they don't really sit down and watch the fights because Shane is has really established himself as a top guy. And to me, Jesus Ramos Jr. is an undefeated fighter. He's an undefeated fighter who I'm not sure I love him at middleweight, but I think at junior middleweight, I think he's one of the top guys in the division. At middleweight, I think he'll be fine. Maybe he now is a middleweight. But I will say the one thing that I don't absolutely love about this fight is Ramos at middleweight, because we just haven't seen him at middleweight consistently with those level of performances. But I'd say that Ramos probably has another gear than Mosley.
I also think, though, that middleweight is a place for Jesus to stand out a little more, potentially. As much as I want to see him one by one take all those great fighters down at 154, you know, I think middleweight, he can really shine and stand out. And maybe that builds into, you know, bigger fights, whether it's people wanting to come to middleweight to fight him specifically. If it's fights at 168, he's a pretty big guy. So I don't hate it, honestly.
Bertha Gomez, he is not undefeated. Well, I know he's not undefeated, but his loss to Lubin, I felt like he won that fight. Bertha Gomez also says, Foster or Fulton, who you got?
Yeah, that's our main event, bro. I mean, we've been talking about that one for months. It's been rescheduled. At one point, it was unclear if that fight was still going to happen at all, and I'm thrilled that it is. Obviously, you know, personally, I think we agree that Shock is probably going to win this fight. My guy, Peter McGrail.
We're gonna get to Peter McGrail after this one.
Yeah, Lukie, I'm gonna get some water while you.
Okay, well, I'll break this down. I think this fight's actually going to be a levels fight, and someone might say, why would it be a levels fight? I think Fulton established himself on the come up, taking ballsy 50-50 fights that he took. I think he fought guys like Adam Lopez and various undefeated fighters as a prospect to establish himself. He beat Angelo Leo and Brandon Figueroa, although the first fight was very close. Now 2-division world champion, but I'm not loving Fulton's moving up the weights, right? So he's at 122, he goes to 126, doesn't make a defense of his belt at 26, going up to 30. It seems like weight is something to notice with Fulton, right? And when guys are moving up in weights and figuring out where they sit with the weight classes, you don't want to run into an established guy. And I also think the problem with this fight is I think Fulton truly thinks that he's better than Foster, which is fine. He's a fighter. That's what you do. But I think that Foster is truly angered that he feels that way, and he feels genuinely disrespected. And I think there's potential that Foster is the bigger fighter and possibly the more talented fighter, and that this fight could be very one-sided. And that's just my personal opinion is, you know, Fulton's done things. Fulton, to me, is a fighter I don't have a read on. He's looked really amazing, and he's looked like a guy that has like a radar system at times in fights, like where he can move around. And then he's looked very pedestrian. You know, he's had fights against good quality guys. I think it was Carlos Castro, first Brandon Figueroa fight, where he's just not separating at all. So he's very inconsistent. And with Shock can definitely forget to throw punches at times, but I do think with Shock, there's a level of consistency. And there's a level of what I'll call competitive meanness, where he hates losing. So I think that you're going to get just a more consistent effort out of Shock. My one fear with both fighters really is someone coming in overtrained, because they've basically been training since July, essentially, for this fight. Or before July. Weren't they supposed to fight July, August?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's basically they've had a 6 or 7 month training camp for this fight.
Yeah, I think Shock is generally, it's like more reliable that he's going to figure it out. With Fulton, I don't know that it's as obvious if he's going to figure it out, but I will say I was impressed with him that second Figueroa fight, man. That being after the Inoue fight, after the Castro fight, after the first Figueroa fight. It was arguably the best performance of his career thus far. And so if there's any hope, if you're a Fulton fan, I would look to that fight as kind of his best chance. I would look to the fact that Shock has also not been active this year, and has been training really hard now for a while. But I mean, listen, not for nothing. And, you know, he was very much out in public, at that fight, that Danny Garcia fight at the Garden, he was there with Danny, obviously being a Philly guy, and it was pretty obvious that he was partying. And so, it's tough to know how that impacts a guy going into.
What do you think of his weight? What do you think of his weight? Like moving up weight classes, he just got.
I don't really get it, bro. Maybe he was so deprived at 122, but he never struck me as like a really big 122 pounder. So I'm not sure what to make of it. Maybe that's where the best opportunities are.
You've seen Shock and you've seen Fulton. Which guy's bigger?
Funny enough, Fulton might be a little bigger, to be honest. Then the question is, why is he bigger? Is he bigger because that's
is it good bigger, or is it just like a bigger guy?
Yeah, I think he might have a little bit of a bigger frame. I also saw a Shock right before a weigh-in, and so that there was like the smallest possible version of him imaginable. And I saw Fulton out on a night on the town. So again, I wouldn't take any of that as gospel, but yeah, I would say Fulton's probably got a little bit of a bigger frame, but that wouldn't worry me either.
Okay. Mancake Crazy said Fulton will be fine at 130. My guy Mancake Crazy, big Bozy Ennis guy, sends me Bozy Ennis training stuff. I like Bozy Ennis too. I think he's a really good coach. I don't know. I just, maybe I'm loyal to my guy Shock, but I just see this as Shock Foster is a very underrated fighter, and people are going to be surprised that he's good. Like, I feel like a lot of people are going to be like,
too. I do too. That's how I see the fight playing out. But I see a world too where Fulton is what the hype said he was 6 years ago, and is able to get Shock in that mode where he's looking a little more than he should be. You know what I mean?
The kryptonite for Shock is he can wait. He can think he's doing a lot, but do a little.
Mm-hmm.
So undercard pretty good, but we're gonna probably skip over it because I'm just getting tired. I drove through the night. Let's get into Mancake Crazy saying Peter McGrail is fighting Shabazz Muhammad. Dakota, go into your Peter McGrail.
Bro, I truly cannot remember who that is right now. That's how much he's my favorite fighter. So I'm going to need you to give me some more context clues.
So Peter McGrail is a British fighter who has been compared prematurely to Lomachenko. And he lost a fight he lost to Jericho O'Quinn, a knockout loss. And then his last fight, I want to say, was a majority or a split decision. And I mean, he's just really struggled as a pro. Like, he's kind of the king of having an amateur style where he's moving a lot, but he's not really effective, and he's finding himself in hard fights, but he probably thinks he's really doing good. This is a fight that I think should be a pretty decent fight. Basically, we're going to get a marathon fight card on Saturday. So you can basically go from this fight card in Monte Carlo, I believe it is, and then go straight into the pay-per-view. So you can do about 8 or 9 hours of boxing if you're a sicko. And I mean, to me, this is make or break for McGrail, because if he can't win this fight, I've never really seen it for him as a pro. And I think that this is, if he doesn't win this, he becomes sort of a high-level gatekeeper.
Yeah, he's got pieces, but again, that doesn't all quite.
I think he's one of these guys that was a great amateur, and he's a shop-worn pro.
Yeah.
That's what I'm seeing.
I agree. And I remember seeing that stoppage loss now, and remembering like, oh, it's just the physicality. And I'm not even talking about the ability to be physical, but just the ability, the durability,
Just looked like his style was better for shorter, quicker fights. And it's like, as a fight is longer and more physical, he just doesn't
if he
have
can come out and go balls to the wall for 9 minutes. And that's
it looks like that was his thing. Like, he could really sprint on you. He could start fast. But when it's like, I think that's the same with Josh Kelly. Like, Josh Kelly's probably really hard to beat in 9 minutes. But if you have 36 minutes, becomes more doable. And then all of a sudden he has to kind of figure out how to win fights without doing what was successful as an amateur, because that all-out blitz thing won't work as a pro.
Yep.
So That's that. Undercard is pretty friggin' good. It's really worth mentioning. Let me read to you. There's one fight that I'm really excited about, bro. It is the IBF women's lightweight title fight between Beatrice Vieira. She's taking on Elif Turhan. I'm sure you totally know about this fight. Vieira could be the best women's fighter in the world to me. And Turhan came out and beat a top contender, Shauna Brown, by knockout. And it was like 45 seconds. She's a Turkish fighter, and she's been someone that's been on my I want to monitor what she's doing radar. This could be an upset. This is a real fight. This is like a 50-50 fight that no one really cares about because it's like two fighters that aren't really based around the US or Britain.
Well, I think Beatrice is incredibly special. I don't know anything about the opponent, but anytime Beatrice is fighting, I make sure I tune in. And we were going to do an interview a while back, and I had a translator set up and everything, and we weren't able to make that happen. So maybe we can get a conversation with Beatrice after.
Another fight on the undercard, Pat McCormick against Kona Walker.
That's a good fight, Bob.
Step up, bro. It's a great step up. Pat McCormick is someone I think really should make that jump next year into the welterweight contender spot. And Kona Walker has that style that kind of gave McCormick issues. I believe he fought a Mexican fighter where he had trouble where the guy was walking him down. So it's a good little step up fight. And then here's another one that I like. Sean McComb is taking on Hugo McLeaf. McLeaf, I believe, fought on the F1 top rank card a while back, a few years ago. And Sean McComb is the guy that fought Arnold Barbosa Jr. And it was a close, tricky fight. So that's a pretty good fight right there. I wanted to finish the show out with a question. Is Jay Opetaia being avoided? And I only say that because he's starting to go down the Golovkin road of just doing his mandatories.
Who is he being avoided by? Is the question.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess that most people would say Zordo, but Zordo's fighting Benavidez, so that doesn't really make sense because Benavidez is not like nobody would. I think that if you looked at the two options, who would you be more afraid of, Opetaia or Benavidez?
I don't even know if it matters. They're both tough fights, and one is probably just way more lucrative than the other. And so it sucks that, he's the bridesmaid, not the bride on this one. But outside of Zordo, there isn't, too many compelling names at cruiserweight. And if there are, they've already lost to Zordo. So it would just be sort of a compare and contrast. I would not say that Zordo is ducking Jai because he is consistently taking tough fights. But I do think it's not great for the division that they haven't fought.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like in January 2024, or not 2024, January 2025, I'm still a year behind from COVID. I marked down that this was going to be Jay Opetaia's year. I was like, this is going to be his year. And in December, I think he's taken a step back. I think fewer people talk about him. I think he's less notable now. And I think he really has to get some traction going into next year.
Because he's not fighting Zordo, but then he's also like the guys that Zordo's fighting, if it's Gulmarian or if it's Chris Billum-Smith or if it's Dorticos, it's like the other tough guys that Jai could fight. He's not fighting them either. So he's a notable fighter who's taking opposition that most fans are just not familiar with or is not as credible outside of Bradis.
Okay. Yeah. I guess I just get frustrated because it's like Opetaia is doing everything we ask a fighter to do, where he's just taking his mandatory opponents because those are the fights that he can get. But he's kind of getting punished for it because it's like these matchups aren't compelling. I mean, I'm not even going to break down what the fight is unless there's a jarring upset. I don't think anyone's fascinated by the matchup unless you're a big Jay Opetaia fan. You're mostly tuning in to see him fight. And what are we on? Maybe the fourth year of Jay Opetaia being a champion. It just seems like he's starting to enter into like the realm of being one of the top fighters, and yet we don't fully know where he stands.
I think that's part of why it's tough for me to view him as one of the top guys, because he's one of the top guys in his division, But in order to be one of the top guys, period, you have to fight other top guys. You know, take on Chris Billum-Smith. You know, take a fight like that with a guy that, you know, fans will have some more familiarity with.
Mankey Crazy says if Ferreira has the stamina, Tehran won't catch her. Hugo is
stamina. I don't think you need to worry about that.
Hugo is there to sell tickets as a Monaco fighter. Zordo is ducking Jay, says Mankey Crazy.
But I'm genuinely curious because we know that Mankey Crazy knows his boxing. What makes you think that he's ducking Jai? Because it's not like he's taking easy fights either. Now he's taking, you know, a pound for pound type of talent.
Hearn is not offering food purses for Jay's opponents, just like with Boots. Boots gave Stanionis part of his purse to get the fight. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but that's interesting that it could just be logistics, that Jay is such a hard hitter that he can't get the fights. You know, like if people want a certain number and if they can't get the number, they'll rather do other fights. I just think it's unfortunate because to me, Jay is one of these fighters that I really enjoy. And at the start of the year when he fought, I think it was David Njinka or something of that nature, I was like, he's going to be one of these guys. He's going to be one of the top guys this year. He's going to be one of the guys that we really hear about. And now we end the year, and I don't think anyone's fascinated with him. Mm-hmm. Like, where do you feel his career went this year?
Probably just laterally. Like, I feel the same way I did about him as I did a year ago because it's all just potential.
Well, I think this fight, and don't quote me on this, isn't even on DAZN. So this fight isn't even accessible on DAZN. So it's like, that's why I say this could potentially be a move backwards, because now not just is he not getting the matchups, now he's not as visible, you know, which I think is a big issue. Anything else you want to talk about, Dakota?
I don't know. I feel like we've been here, there, and everywhere around the world of boxing today, bub.
I think we did a good show. We'll tune in next week. We will break down this, whatever happens this week. There's going to be definitely a few boxing cards. And then the following week, I will be in Stockton for the Matchroom card, more than likely. So
nice.
Boots on the ground insight, you know, people can get really excited for that. And then we basically don't get a break, Dakota. Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua. I know you're super thrilled on that fight week. Then we get the Japanese fight card with Inoue Picasso. That's coming up the 27th. And then Amanda Serrano, Erica Cruz, January 3rd.
I got a quick one for you, Lukie, because I don't know that we talked about it, but what did you think about Takuma Inoue upsetting Nasukawa? Because I never saw the fight, but I'm wondering.
That's great that you brought it up, because these things, I've been so busy. It's so easy for me to forget stuff. I mean, I think it just shows how out of touch I am with these divisions and how a little bit of flash and substance and good victories will like with tension. At first I didn't believe that he was that, and then he gets a win over Maloney and I go, okay, he has to be good.
So I think he still could be, by the way, just to, you know.
I'm not saying he can't be, but like I definitely feel like I overrated him based on some of his wins. And then with Takuma losing a fight to a very good fighter, I felt like, okay, this is that passing of the torch moment. And then in this fight, it was just a very tactical, technical win. Like, it was no smoke and mirrors. It was just a professional, clean victory that made me wonder, is this just going to be what happens when Tenshin fights elite fighters? Like, he's just going to, when he fights those guys that are the three best guys in the division, two best guys, the guys that, and honestly, the Maloney fight, when I went back and watched it, was much closer than people thought. To me, it feels like Tenshin is kind of freestyling and going off of athleticism. And I'm curious if he's going to do more, because it feels like maybe he can get a little further, but he needs more to go further.
Well, I thought it was very interesting that happened. I've always liked Takuma Inoue, and I think it could set up potentially a very exciting fight between him and Bam.
There's one other thing we should bring up is Jimuel Pacquiao. I think I said it right. I don't know if you know this. The son of Manny Pacquiao turned pro last night and fought to a draw. So his pro debut was a draw, which
Was
I
he
think
good?
I have no idea. I've never once seen him fight. I know he fought on some amateur shows. I haven't heard anything, but I know he fought to a draw against basically an unheralded opponent. You can read into it what you want, but that if you tune into this for news, that's something also that happened. So yeah.
Oh, good for him.
Yeah, good for him. So we will be back next week for Dakota and myself. We wish you the best week and stay warm out there.
Doing our best out here, bro. Peace, guys.